I'm Emilie Lunt, and I believe with my whole heart and soul that our homes are places where we can seek and love the truth, celebrate beauty, and learn good things every single day. That's why I'm educating my kids at home, and I know you can do it too. Welcome to Heart and Soul Homeschool.
We're so glad to have you with us today. We have something that I think is going to be, it's not unique to podcasting whatsoever, but it's unique to us. It's something that we've been talking about. Emilie had a great idea. She works on a podcast. We work on a podcast. And so we have decided to launch what I hope is the first of several crossover episodes for you today. So we have Emilie Lunt with Heart and Soul Homeschool. I am Christine Stigall with Making the Leap. And you get just me today. You don't get the Chris and Christine piece of things. So whole new world.
The ladies show today.
all around new attempts at things today. So we're super excited about this because I think with what Emilie, with what you do with your podcast, talking about homeschooling, and what Chris and I talk about with ours, the idea of taking that leap of faith, regardless of what your decision is, moving your children from what I keep calling, government-run schools, moving them into something, anything that allows you to be more in control as a parent is something that has been just... It's such a unique way to bring the two together because they're both really, really important topics.
Well, and the Christian element of them, I think we're all driven by faith.
Yes.
And you and I talk about this a lot, right? And so this will be a fun conversation.
Absolutely.
Just to kind of bring other people into our chat.
So if you haven't listened to me with Making the Leap, or you haven't listened to Emilie with Heart and Soul Homeschool, that's a little
It's
mouthful.
A tongue twister. After we named it, I realized what a tongue twister it was.
If you haven't done that, I would encourage you after this episode, check into hers, check into ours, listen to both, and you'll kind of get a good feel for what we are talking about, which is how God is moving in families across the board, no matter what your decision, and how you can be listening to that with every decision that you're making, but specifically when it comes to that education idea, because it is it is big.
Christian education of all kinds.
Of all kinds in any way, and it's all okay. In fact, Emilie, I was just sharing with you, I read a review that was just posted recently on one of your episodes where we actually did share a guest. Again, it wasn't a crossover, but we shared a guest talking about this idea of school. And the commenter said, no home is alike. And that's no parenting is alike. No family setup is exactly the same. And so I think we need to remember that to keep a perspective going on what we're all doing and why. We are all in this together as Christians, trying to do the right thing for the salvation of our children. And I was really glad when I read that review, she was like, I love this, breath of fresh air.
Such good perspective, right?
It's like no one's alike, but we're all in this together. So with that said, I'm going to have Emilie go ahead and introduce who we're talking to today. And then from there, I'd encourage you over the next few weeks to kind of branch out into both episodes and check them both out. Check out everything that we're talking about.
Yeah, we're excited. And we're actually going to have a couple of follow-up episodes related to this one. So we'll talk more about that later. But our guest today, we're so excited, is a woman named Christine Agin. She lives in the great state of Montana. And I could say I stalked you down, Christine, because I actually heard you talked about on a podcast that I listen to every day, the Steve Deace Show. He's part of the Blaze Network. And so you wrote him a letter telling him about all that you were doing, starting a Christian school. You're a homeschool mom. You're still homeschooling your own kids while you're starting this school for other children. I mean, just amazing. She's a go-getter, folks. But I heard her letter read, and I thought, this is incredible. And I texted you right away and said, we've got to find this woman because there's so much here that both of our audiences will love. So with that, let's just jump right in. And Christine, welcome.
Well, thank you.
We're so glad to have you.
I'm so excited.
Very, very glad to have you. I know that we are going to be talking a lot over these next few episodes as we move back and forth between both podcasts about your story and just how you came to the point of starting this school. So if you don't mind just sharing a little bit rather than any more build up from us, this is your story. So if you don't mind telling us just a little bit about what brought you to the point that you're at now. I know it's hard to get that 30,000-foot view, but if you could share with listeners that.
Okay. So I've homeschooled. My husband was homeschooled, and I have homeschooled since my children were born, basically. I've homeschooled this whole time. I have 2 high schoolers now. And I ran the local homeschool co-op for my area for a while. And while I was doing that, the Lord kept putting on my heart that I was supposed to start a private Christian school. And I actually argued with him for about 5 years. And because I didn't feel like I was equipped to do this. And then COVID hit. And our homeschool co-op filled up and had a waiting list, and people were desperate to get out of the system. And people kept telling me, can you homeschool my kids for me? Can you just, turn your co-op into a school so that I have another option? Because in our community, there is no private school option. It's either public school or homeschool, or you have to drive 45 minutes to the nearest private school. And so I kept saying, somebody should do this, somebody should do this, somebody should do this, until God kept saying, I called you. Wow. And so I did. And I found another gal, Megan, up at camp, and she was a college teacher. And she said she also felt that there were some holes in how we were doing education. And her and I put our brains together, and we said, if you could design the perfect school, what would it look like? And that's what we started to do. We took the entire school model and we broke it down to start, and we rebuilt it from scratch around how children learn.
How long did that process take you, just out of curiosity, from when you and Megan got together to you opening the doors, so to speak? I'm very curious on the back, you know what I mean? Like the logistics of that. How I just, as a former teacher, I know what it takes to prepare for one class of, middle school that I teach. That's mind blowing to me and so impressive.
Well, we did it in 1 year. But we kind of, Megan put it one time, it's like we're building the plane while we're flying it. The first year was interesting. There was a lot of, we better change this, we better adapt this. There was a lot of huge challenges that we kept coming against. There were a few times that we really felt that the enemy was coming hard against what we were trying to do, that we felt alone and just lost. And the Steve Days thing came at the perfect time, that we really just felt that we were alone in this. And then the community heard us on the radio, and they came around us. It's just been tremendous, because there have been times where we felt like this is just ridiculous. So, but we started with, like, this is how we're going to structure the classrooms, and we built a general model. I brought in a board made up of teachers, principals, parents, and other homeschool moms. And we just put our brains together and designed the curriculum, and we pulled from all these areas, and just it came together perfect. And it's really turned into an entirely different education model than anything I've ever seen.
Well, talk about that a little bit, because I've heard you describe it as homeschooling for people who can't homeschool, right? For whatever reason, whether that be they have to work or, and so talk about that, because there's so much beauty in the homeschool model, and it's really exciting to me to think about that sort of being expanded into a broader reach.
Well, what's funny about that is when I used that as a description, my principal corrected me, and she said, that's not really what we're doing. I said, but it's the closest way I can describe it to people, because what it actually is child-centered learning. Okay. And we have kids that the way our current school model works is you get moved along to the next grade, pass or fail, whether you have mastered the material or not. And the way our school model works is if a kid doesn't get something, they're given the chance to go back and learn it, and before they're pushed along, but they're not held back on the rest of the material. So each kid gets to work at their own pace. And the way that we've been able to do that in a classroom setting is by borrowing from the Montessori and the one-room schoolhouse type setting and having multi-grades in the same classroom.
I think that's the idea of not leaving a child behind, without the cliche of no child left behind. But I've had,
Right.
3 kids that excel in some areas, fall short in others. And that concept of just letting them proceed and progress as they can and when they can, that to me, that is homeschool. That is the idea of homeschool. And anytime I even consider homeschooling, which I think I do probably 2 or 3 times a year, I always kind of think, well, that would be so great because then in math we could do this, but in English we could do this, and we could take the field trip here and, meet every child where they are so that they're not really falling behind, and kind of get rid of that idea of behind, because are they really behind? Like, they're probably not when you get down to it. So I'll agree with you on that. That does sound like, homeschooling for those who maybe aren't super comfortable homeschooling.
Yeah. So Christine, has it been hard to explain this? I mean, because we're just having this conversation right now, and it is, you're right, kind of hard to explain to other people. But as far as helping parents in your community sort of catch the vision for what you're doing, how has that gone?
Well, that has actually been one of our biggest struggles, is getting parents to buy into this doesn't look like what you think education should look like.
Yeah.
Because it's not a traditional classroom. We allow each kid extra, wherever their giftings are, we allow that to be explored outside of just, okay, the class is doing this. And the idea that you're going to have multiple grades in one classroom, parents really struggle with that. They're like, my kid's in this grade. And we're like, well, yes and no. We're going to teach core lessons. We have core lessons that are like, we're going to do biology. We're going to do the biology of plants this week, that all 3 grades in that classroom will do together. But when they break into their individual subgroups, they work at their own pace in math and reading and writing. And last year we had 2 kids that were like 3 or 4 grades behind when they started in their math. And we were able to just go back and review what they had missed and get them up to grade level within like 2 months of the school year starting. And on top of that, we had a 7th grader that blew through all of our math, and we bought her algebra so she could just keep going. And by the end of 7th grade, she had completed algebra.
It's so amazing to me because I listen to that, and I know Emilie's kids are a little bit younger than where my kids are at, but as I listen to that, I just think, well, of course, that makes total sense, right?
It's very logical, right? It kind of makes you think, what have we been doing all of this time?
It's so antithetical to what actually happens, because of course, when I master the one thing, I want to jump onto the next. And why would I have to wait 2 or 3 months to get there? Of course, that makes sense. I'm loving some of what you're saying. I'm really, really curious. Something that everybody asks all the time, the finance end of things, right? And I know we can talk more about some of the other challenges that you have faced, but money is what keeps jumping out at me. Just when you said you went and bought an algebra, you went and got the algebra, what I would call curriculum for somebody. Money doesn't grow on trees as much as, a lot of our kids seem to think it does, but it doesn't. And you can't do something for nothing. I mean, you can talk, but to have the material. So in terms of cost for your families, in terms of cost for you from behind the scenes, how did you meet? How are you meeting? How are you approaching those kinds of struggles?
Well, part of the main struggle that we came up with was the finances is obviously a reason that a lot of people don't send their kids to private school.
Right.
So we did come up with a couple of ways people could donate to help people to send their kids to. We have a Widows and Orphan Fund that fully scholarships children that have lost a parent, because the Bible says you take care of widows and orphans first. So we had 3 children that came on the Widows and Orphan scholarships last year, and 1 in this next coming year that's taking advantage of that. And then I set up a sponsor a kid program where people could give a regular monthly $50 a month, kind of like Compassion International, and sponsor a kid to go to a private Christian school in their own community. We tend to try to think our missions need to just be overseas, and that's not what the Bible says. It says we're supposed to take care of our own communities first. And so we started the Sponsor the Child program to help give financial aid to kids who couldn't afford it to go through the school. And then we bridged the gap with a couple of big donors that caught the vision and helped out. And then my husband and I loaned the school some money out of our retirement fund to help with some of the startup costs. Because, we wanted to put our money where our mouth was, I guess, and felt that this was desperately needed in our community.
That's just such a big deal. I mean, I was thinking you put your money where your mouth is. Like that's something that I think our society wants things to be easy and wants it to just kind of flow and just, this is what I want to do, so I'm going to do it. But it doesn't work that way. And I think just what you said, you believed in it enough for you and your husband to put forth not just your time and not just your talents, but your resources as well, and reach out to other people. I think that's something that we kind of have to step out of ourselves a little bit. I would think, I know you have to do it with any kind of tuition, any kind of, new decision, but kind of get beyond it to see the big picture. And that's big, to put your own checkbook. I don't even know if that's, people are like, what's a checkbook? But put your own little checkbook where you think it's going to be most useful,
Well, and that sacrifice, I think also, even we just live in a society that's sort of sacrifice averse, and we're so into being comfortable. And so I think any kind of sacrifice, whether it's monetary or, sacrificing a career, a job, it's hard to homeschool. It's hard to do all the side hustles, that sometimes we have to do to send kids to Christian school. But Christine, I was super excited when I heard you talking about kind of the Compassion International style, because we've been doing that forever. Right? And it's not that we shouldn't be looking outside and doing international missions, but that really kind of touched my heart when you woke me up when you said that. Like, we need to be looking at the kids in our own communities. Like, they are our mission field. They are our future. And I know my husband and I have signed up to sponsor a kid with you guys, and we're so thrilled. And I hope our listeners will be sure to link back to that. And I think that's also a great idea for other Christian schools and maybe even some homeschool groups too, to put that out. I think you've had a wonderful idea, Christine.
Do you have the, I guess if you could share too, what do your numbers look like in terms of students, teachers, and your facility? Again, and I ask these questions to kind of showcase what is possible. Nothing has to look exactly like what you're doing, but I feel like for the Making the Leap audience, I think there are always people listening who are thinking, maybe I could do that. Maybe that's something for me. And I know in future episodes we're going to talk about some of this too, but for you right now where you're at, what's your enrollment? What's your teacher ratio to student? What does that look like for you?
Well, as part of our education model, we capped our classroom sizes at 12 students per teacher, because all of the educational data out there says that that's optimal, that more than 12 students to a teacher is when you start losing kids. It's funny when you consider the class sizes in your average public school. All the data says that 12 is the max you should have per teacher. So that's what we did. We capped it at 12. Last year we were way under that because it was our very first year. And there was a lot of parents that I think really wanted to see if we could do this, if we could pull it off. And ironically, the parents that did enroll and believe in the vision were people who knew me either through the church or through homeschool community. And so they knew my record as an educator through the homeschool community. And they're like, if Christine is doing this, it's going to be amazing. And so there was a little bit of that for my own reputation that helped that first open the door. But now the reputation has got out that we actually are doing a very good job educating these kids. And we've doubled in size over last year. So our first year we had 15 kids at the start of the school year. And then we had a couple that moved away. So we dropped down to, I think, 11 by the end of the school year. This year, we're going into the school year. We have 22 kids signed up at this point. We have, like I said, one on the widows and orphans, and we have quite a few that we're able to get financial aid thanks to the Sponsor the Kid program getting out there more from Steve Days' show. But there was another family that she was vaccine injured really severely from COVID. And she was a homeschool mom and was really struggling to continue to homeschool her kids, but didn't want to put them in public school. And so she's sending her son to our school this next year, which I was happy to be able to step in the gap there and help her out on that.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
That's really, really great. I like, I don't know. The more I hear you talk and the more I think about other episodes where we've interviewed other people who have just started these schools, you do have to kind of grow word of mouth a little bit, but there is something to be said about former teachers, people with education background coming in and doing what they know, what they were trained to do, but doing it with that biblical piece behind them that says we need to be taking care. We need to be taking care of all people, for whatever their circumstances.
Yeah. And just kind of that all hands on deck mentality. I mean, I think if we look at what's happening in our schools and our culture right now, this is not the time to quibble over minor differences. This is the time to, help as many kids as we can, be training them up for these times that we live in, because we need to be raising little warriors right now. I mean, there's no doubt about it, and that's what you're doing, Christine. One thing that Christine and I have talked a lot about just as friends, as we both sort of navigated, because you guys put Anna, your daughter, in Christian school about the same time that I started homeschooling my daughter. So we started with kindergarten. Your kids are older.
Right.
But we have talked so much about sort of this tension between the homeschool realm of Christian education and the private traditional Christian school realm. And we have none of that between us.
Right.
And so it kind of, I would say, I don't want to say, it sort of bewilders us that anyone isn't just cheerleading anything that would put their kids in the position to be learning a biblical worldview, that kind of thing. But Christine, when you and I met, we had a great chat, and you were telling me that you received some pushback from some of your friends in the homeschool community. And I don't bring this up to be negative, but just sort of as a wake-up call for all of us to sort of examine our heart. It's honest, and to examine our hearts, because I think because what we're doing, whether we're making the sacrifices to homeschool or to send kids to Christian school, you have to really believe in what you're doing. And I think that sometimes that strong belief that drives us and makes us good at educating our kids, or good to have the tenacity to do what it takes to send kids to private school, can easily turn into pride. And I know that's something that I have to constantly be on guard. So tell us a little bit about that, just as sort of a cautionary tale, so that we can encourage one another to not be that way.
Actually, one of the other board members, she's also a homeschool mom, and she helped me with the curriculum selection committee, because her and I both know curriculum really well. We're both veteran homeschool moms, and she has also been very vocal in the blowback that she has gotten in the homeschool community for being on the board, even, let alone being the person who started the school. And so there tends to be this attitude that the way I am educating my kids is the best way because I have chosen it. And a lot of times we justify it by vilifying the other selections instead of being moms that support each other. And there is some of that. And I actually ran into that a lot with the churches when I was trying to find a church that would host our school. Was that there was this attitude of like, this is a homeschool church. So the pastor leadership, they all homeschool, so they support homeschools. And it was like, okay, but not everybody can homeschool. And then there was churches that it was like the pastors and the leadership had chosen to send their kids to public school. And so they felt like if they promoted our school, they would be vilifying people who sent their kids to public public school. And it's like, instead of having this overall embrace of let's save as many kids and find the right places to educate them as we can, it was like you had to pick a team.
Yeah, well, Christine, I might have told you this before, and I know I've told you this. Last summer at our church, we had a parent summit, and we tackled a lot of tough topics. And whether wisely or whether I was just a glutton for punishment, we did a night on education where we did a panel where we had public school, Christian school, homeschool, the whole gamut represented. And I was so fascinated in the lead up to that. You know, I would hear parents saying, well, I'm team public school, I'm team homeschool, I'm team Christian school. And it's like, oh my gosh, like, let's just all be team our Jesus? Kids.
Right, we're team Jesus.
Yeah,
team
and so
children.
it's not just your community. I think it's something that while it's hard to talk about and maybe doesn't make any of us look great, it's something that we need to talk about.
Right. Because it forces people to look in the mirror just a little bit. I mean, I always have to do that because my instinct is to get defensive. The minute I know I could pull my daughter and homeschool her tomorrow, I know I could do that. But I have to look at the big picture of what exact needs she has at this exact moment. And so I do believe education is fluid. And I think if we want to do it this year this way, we're going to do it great. And next year we might switch it up. And I think that's kind of what I think is the other piece to challenge, is that it does not have to always be exactly this little box that we've made for ourselves. If you're all in homeschooling right now and then you get to, I don't know, 6th grade and you're like, I'm not sure. I want families like Emilie's family to be able to say confidently without, that blowback, this is good for you. Good for you for recognizing where you are as a parent. In the same way, if I were to pull my daughter, I would want that same response. You just recognizing what people are doing. But it is a mirror in front of our faces in terms of, I know it's right. I know what we're doing is right. I know Emilie knows what she's doing is right. And I can own that without making it combative for people, right? And it is that. And I see it in the private school community too, because, you hear that, I could never, I don't want to sit with my children all day. Well, let's be careful how we say that too, because that's not kind to the parents that are happy to sit with their children all day and work with them and teach them and love, I think we have to be careful.
So, Christine, one thing that you mentioned really briefly was the discussions that you were having with churches. And so a little sneak peek, next week we're going to release an episode that you and I did with the pastor of the host church. And it was an incredible conversation. I hope people will tune into that. But tell us just a little bit about what that was like, because I think sometimes we think, oh, Montana's conservative, right? This should be no problem. People should love conservative things like homeschooling. But truly that was a challenge that you just described. But just kind of give people a clue at the beautiful situation that you've ended up in, because it's a cool story.
Okay. So we live in a valley that is sparsely populated and very spread out. And there's no Christian schools within a 45-minute drive either direction. So your options are public school or homeschool. And this is part of what God put a vision on my heart, that we needed a school here in the middle of the valley. And my town, Stevensville, is smack in the middle of the valley. So I figured it'd be perfect location for this. So I started going to each of the churches and I said, we've already put the board together. We've got the curriculum. We've hired the teachers. We're ready to go. We just need a building. And several of these churches, I would call and leave multiple messages, and nobody would even call me back. One I stopped by, and the pastor it used to be a school. This one killed me. It used to be a school. And so it's set up already. It was perfect. We could have just moved right in, and it's empty during the week. And the pastor goes, I don't want to put our tax exempt status at risk. And, I'm an accountant. So I'm like, well, I can help you with that. There's ways we can work around that where I can just reimburse for costs and I can make donations. I could tithe to the church from what the school makes. You don't have to charge us rent. Mm-hmm. And the current pastor who did end up hosting us, they don't charge us rent. We just give them a facility use fee that covers, toilet paper and janitorial and utilities. And it's basically maintenance and expenses. and they don't charge us rent at all for using their building.
That's amazing.
And so
Yes.
he has been so generous. So generous.
I think that's also good. I mean, we talked to pastors on our episodes, a few of ours, about, what the hesitation is. And, I understand everybody's got something they have to worry about and think about. We're always in our own lane and we don't always know. But I think it's awesome, actually, that you said that as an accountant, you could say, like, well, actually, I mean, I wouldn't know that information. But what a great providence that you did. And you were able to say, well, this is how it could work. Because I do think, again, it's something to keep in mind. There are ways around.
Yeah,
think just about any roadblock.
Yeah, all of us
do it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's amazing.
Well, Christine, I cannot thank you enough again for taking your time. I could probably talk to you for quite some time, but I don't want to take away from what Emilie is doing with her podcast or take away from ours as well. But I really hope today people have been able to kind of listen and think, what's available out there to do when you put your mind to it, when you pray about it, when you decide, I'm just going to go for it and give it that whirl, but also to be supportive of what you see around you. I think that's something that's most important to keep in our brains.
Yeah, just to encourage one another. And I mean, Christine, we didn't even talk about all the things that Christine does. I mean, you are a homeschool mom. You led your co-op. You are the chairman of the board of a Christian school. You run your own accounting business. All of these things. And since I met you a few weeks ago, I mean, honestly, you've been such an inspiration to me because you've got me thinking, what else can I be doing? What other gifts and talents has God given me that I don't only, need to just homeschool my kids? Like, how can I be looking to bring other families along, whatever that looks like? And I think that's the point that we're at in our culture. And this point in time in history is that, like we talked about before, it is all hands on deck. So you're a beautiful example of that to us. I'm so encouraged by this conversation. I hope everyone else
We'll put this information, the support. I'm blanking on what you called, or what, Christine, what you called Sponsor a Kid.
Yeah.
Yes. We will put that information in the show notes that's out there. We will have information on both of our podcasts linked together. I'm excited for this to get out to people just in general for that idea of we're here for our children first and foremost. And Christine, you are doing that, leading by example. We're so pleased to have had you on with us. Cannot thank you enough. And we know that people are going to benefit from this immensely.
Well, and I hope that there are other people out there that will take this model that we have done, that will reach out and say, hey, how can I do that in my church and in my community? Because I would love to just give people the wisdom of what we've learned walking through the hard way and pass it on so they can maybe skip a few steps and jump right in and do it successfully in their community.
Well, if you're comfortable, then we will include your email contact information as well for somebody if they wanted to ask you a few questions. Nothing's for free, but sometimes free advice is always a good thing. So thank you again. We appreciate it, and we look forward to the continued conversations.
Heart and Soul Homeschool is a podcast presentation of the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the host and guests and not necessarily the views of the Herzog Foundation. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode of Heart and Soul Homeschool.